Hello, it's Joseph here with another video. It's been a couple weeks since I've had put out another video, and I thought, well, maybe it's time to do another one. And so here it is in November, beginning part of November, and I thought I'd share with you today a very special part of my collection. When I started collecting, putting back a record collection several years ago, one of the first artists that I knew I wanted to focus on was perhaps an artist that most people are not familiar with, or is not really highly collectible to some people, but it's Doug Sahm. Doug Sahm from Texas. He was part of the Sir Douglas, or the leader of the Sir Douglas Quintet back in the 60s. He went on to do some solo albums as Doug Sahm and Doug Sahm and Band. And later on, he would go on with what they call the super group of the Texas Tornadoes, which included himself, Augie Meyer, who was part of the Sir Douglas Quintet on keyboard and accordion, and also Freddie Fender. And that was quite a group, and that's perhaps where he got a lot of popularity in his later career. And then he went on to do a couple of some more solo work before his untimely death at the young age of 58 back in 1999. So today I'm going to share with you some albums from my my Doug Sahm and the Sir Douglas Quintet. And first of all, it's Mendocino, the Sir Douglas Quintet, Mendocino. And of course, this has the big hit, the big title hit, Mendocino, which was played on the radio. That was also on this album is She's About a Mover. And that was, I think, came out in 1965. That was Doug's first hit. And it was a combination of Tex-Mex sound and the British invasion. And when producer Huey Moe came across the band, he wanted them to take advantage of the British invasion, which was very popular at the time. And so hence they changed the name to the Sir Douglas Quintet to give that British sound as far as the name. But when they started appearing on TV with some of their Chicano band members, it was quite a surprise. Obviously, they were not from England. So this is a really good album. Again, it's got Mendocino, a beautiful song called "I Want to Be Your Mama Again," and "Crossroads," which is really one of the great songs that the Sir Douglas Quintet did. "Texas Me," and I have to say, at a very early stage in my listening to the Sir Douglas Quintet, it always got me fascinated about Texas in general, about the Texas vibe, and just that whole thing that goes on along with Texas. And it intrigued my interest. And lo and behold, many years later, I married a wife who's from Texas, and I moved to Texas. So here I am in Texas, perhaps maybe thanks to the Sir Douglas Quintet. But I was really lucky to find this album at a local flea market here in McAllen, and I only paid a couple bucks for it because it's really hard to find, even here in Texas, it's hard to find Sir Douglas and Doug Sahm albums out in the wild. In fact, one time I went to Josie Records out in Dallas, and I asked some of the young clerks who are usually pretty knowledgeable about music, I go, if they had any Doug Sahm, and they said they never had heard of him, which that's kind of surprising. Here I am in Texas, and one of the true icons of Texas music, they never heard of him. Moving on is another Sir Doug album. This one is called Together After 5. This is on the Mercury label, which also that first album was on the Mercury label. And this one's got some other great songs it's almost, sometimes Doug would redo his songs. Some of them kind of sounded similar. This one's got one called Nuevo Laredo, which still kind of has that groove of She's About a Mover and Mendocino. They all have that pumping Farfisa, might not have been a Farfisa organ, but that almost cheesy sound of Augie Meyer. Cheesy, but I say that in a lovingly good way because it's a beautiful sound that fits the music perfect, and Augie Meyer plays it so well. But it's got Nuevo Laredo, Another thing that I want to point out, it's got the T-Bone Shuffle. What I really admired from Doug at a very early stages is how diverse he was. He could play it all. He would do, of course, the rockers like Mendocino, the 60s rockers, and then he would go into some blues like the T-Bone Shuffle, like the T-Bone Walker groove. And then he would also get into almost like a Tex-Mex Norteño groove, and also some psychedelic music. Oh, he has one here called Magic Illusion, which kind of gets into that psychedelic vibe. But also a good album. You can't go wrong with any of his early albums on the Smash label. I'm still looking for a couple of them, but once again, this is a good one. Sir Douglas Quintet, Together After 5. Moving along. Another Sir Douglas Quintet album. This one is 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 4 because it's got some added members on here besides the actual quartet. And this is I really like this album cover. It's like a drawing. I'm not sure who did the drawing, but it's cool. And actually, I was very lucky to find with this album, it's got the original liner, which has the band members, of course, there, and the song titles and the additional personnel. On this album, the band is supplemented by some horns, a really good horn section. That's one thing Doug always had. When he added horns to his music, man, it was always outstanding. On some of these songs here, I believe they were recorded in San Francisco, where Doug spent some time back in of course, in the 60s and in the 70s. And great horn section of Bill Atwood, who went on to play with Cold Blood and Boss Skaggs. Frank Moran, who was a long-stand member of Doug's groups. Martin Fierro, who also would play with Jerry Garcia in the Legion of Mary and some of Jerry's side projects. And of course, the amazing Mal Martin, who was an outstanding reed man from San Francisco, who played with Santana, Cold Blood, Boss Skaggs. He made some of his own jazz albums. He died at a young age too, but Mal Martin, he was a tremendous reed player. But this is a really good album here. It's, once again, there's a lot of diverse music, some blues, some Texas country type music, and I was glad to find this one locally too. Once again, Sir Douglas Quintet, 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 4, and there's the back cover. Now, if I have to pick out a favorite Doug album, this is the Sir Douglas Quintet, The Return of Doug Saldana. And from day one, just seeing this album cover of Doug kicking back on his porch, probably back in San Antonio, and he's got holding a Big Red soda there. At the time when I first saw this, I didn't even know what Big Red was, but it's a famous soda that's made. It's not exclusive to Texas, but it's had its origins here in Texas. It's kind of course, it's a sweet, syrupy soda, but it's pretty good. I like it. Some people say it tastes like cough syrup, but I like it. And anyways, there's Doug kicking back with his cowboy hat and his boots. And it just really gives the feel of the album. And then, of course, in the back, it's got like a wino guy laying on a couch, and there's Doug. And I don't know if it's one of the band members are there or not, and some sign there that it's telling people to go vote. But this album is back from 1971, I believe, 72. Not sure of the year, but this, as I said earlier, if I have to pick one Doug album, this is it. This is just truly a remarkable album. It's got that Sir Douglas Quintet sound, somewhat like Mendocino, with some groovers like Preach What You Live and Live What You Preach, Me and My Destiny. Of course, it's got the T-Bone Walker sound on Papa Ain't Salty. But it's got some really standout, like oldies but goodies type, almost like the sound on She's Hugging You, but She's Looking at Me, and a killer version of Freddie Fender's Wasted Days and Wasted Nights. In fact, this version came out a couple years before Freddie's made his resurgence back with Wasted Days and Wasted Nights. And Doug, to me, this is the go-to version of that song. It's just great horns by Rocky Morales. He was one of Doug's longtime members in the horn section, and a great version of the old standard, the gypsy, kind of a shuffling groove on that one. But I cannot say enough about this album, The Return of Doug Saldana. And like I say, this is probably in a desert island pick if I have to choose one. Moving along, Doug would go on to be signed by Atlantic Records. They thought they were going to do something similar as they did with Willie Nelson when he went to Atlantic. And this is Doug Sahm and band, and this was produced by Jerry Wexler. And Bob Dylan actually makes an appearance on it. You can see him in this cartoon type drawing there. He's in the cover. You can see a little bit closer. There's Bob in the front wearing that purplish shirt. But it's got an all-star lineup here. Many heavy hitters. Augie Meyer, of course, and Dr. John, David Bromberg, David Fathead Newman. Flaco Jimenez makes his first appearance with Doug here. And this is a fun album. It sounds almost like a jam session, like they're just getting together to jam in the studio, but it sounds like everybody's having a good time, drinking some beers. It's got a great version. Is Anybody Going to San Antone? That's, I think it was first made a hit by Charlie Pride. It's got some rockers. It's Gonna Be Easy. It's got a great version of Wallflower, a Bob Dylan song with Doug and Bob singing lead on that both. It's got, of course, it's got Faded Love, the old Bob Wills song, so it's got that country flavor. Once again, another version of Pop Ain't Salty. This one with a great sax solo by Fathead Newman. Unfortunately, the Atlantic years didn't really take off as planned. There's another follow-up album that I'm looking forward to. It's outstanding, also called Texas Tornado, and but these are good albums. The one on Atlantic. And Doug would go on to the Tacoma label. This album is called Hell of a Spell. This finds Doug in the presence of a large horn section. And once again, some great, this is maybe perhaps a more blues-based and straight-ahead rockers. And at the time of this album, I was able to hear Doug in Los Angeles at the Whiskey A Go-Go, and he had a full horn section. And throughout the years, I saw Doug, and mostly in the revived version of the Sir Douglas Quintet in the late 70s and the early 80s. And it was some of the most fun live music I ever heard. In fact, back in those days when I had a girlfriend, every new girlfriend that I ever had, which I never had that many, but every girlfriend that I wanted to take on at a date and Doug was in town, I would take her to see the Sir Douglas Quintet, and she'd always be kind of scratching my head, like, who are we seeing again? But by the end of the evening, she was usually sold and said, man, that was a lot of fun to hear that band, because Doug was always just a blast to hear in person. So glad I got to hear him several times. And last but not least, this Doug eventually went to the Anto label. He was very active in the Austin scene. And once again, here you find him with a huge horn section, a big horn section, I should say. And this is a great album. You find Doug in really fine voice on his last couple albums. Some great oldies, My Dearest Darling, What's Your Name, Buzz, 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 an old-time rocker. But this is really an outstanding album. This is I could say one of his later albums, but truly outstanding. And I can't recommend this one also high enough if you want to get into some of his later music. But unfortunately, Doug passed away in 1999 at the young age of 58 while he was out in Taos, New Mexico. And in fact, his birthday's coming up November 6th, so just a couple days. But I always get just so much joy about listening to the music of Doug and the Sir Douglas Quintet. And there's actually, I think it's still on there, a good documentary on Amazon. It's really outstanding. In fact, I should check it out again. I saw it, I believe, a couple years ago. But just type in Doug Sahm. I can't remember the exact title of the name offhand. But truly outstanding. So anyways, it's Friday morning. Got some time on my hands, so I think I'll start spinning some Doug Sahm and Sir Douglas Quintet. Like, subscribe. Talk to you later.